long ago?
That I knew about what?
You knew that Mr. Teskey had turned in this evidence, that you knew that the report would have existed because you just told this court that the doc report was okayed by you.
Sure.
Don't you think it was misleading to this court to not just say at that point, just so you know, I know about this. I knew about this then. I was involved.
I did not intend to mislead the court. My understanding of what was dropped off at the sheriff's department is on this computer screen, and it looks absolutely nothing like the live rounds from the set of Rust.
The truth of this matter is you don't like Mr. Baldwin very much, do you?
That is absolutely untrue. I actually really appreciate Mr. Baldwin's movies. I really appreciated the acting that he did on Saturday Night Live, and I really appreciate his politics.
You told one of the witnesses who disagreed with you during an interview that you thought Mr. Baldwin was a cocksucker.
I do not recall saying that. I know that was something that Mr. Baldwin would say on the set of Rust. I don't recall saying that.
Do you deny that under oath?
Without having more information, I can tell you that I do not recall ever saying that. And if I did say it, I invite you to point it out to me.
Gets better.
You called him an arrogant prick to another witness.
To who? To what witness?
I'm asking you, did you call him an arrogant prick during a witness interview?
I don't believe I did. I don't recall.
Do you deny that?
Without knowing what you're talking about? All I can tell you is that I can't respond if I don't know what you're talking about.
And you said also to witnesses that you would teach him a lesson.
I never said to witnesses that I would teach him a lesson. Absolutely not. In fact, Mr. Spiro, I want to give a full response to your question. I made every effort in this case to resolve this case with your client in a very favorable way for him.
All right, I'm going to move to strike this. It's not responsive.
It is responsive.
I don't want to talk about plea negotiations.
Yeah, and it's not responsive. So I have no further questions.
All right, do you have any follow-up testimony? All right.
I want to say I have no recollection of calling him any of those names. I have invited the defendant to tell me what he's talking about, and he has declined. I want the court to take notice of that.
Thank you.
Okay, so basically, blah, 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 blah. Here's what happened. Some guy brought in some bullets that might have had something to do with Hannah's case, because she was charged as well in this death. And they were not put under, this evidence was not put under the Alec Baldwin case, which is, it should have been. And they were these bullets. Now, again, I'm not quite sure what they exactly had to do, but it doesn't matter. The defense gets to see it all. Okay, that's the whole point. They can't withhold, they can't decide what is exculpatory or not. They have to let them know what is available. That. They can't, they can obviously say, okay, this has nothing to do with the case. We're not going to use it. Nobody's going to use it. Yeah, whatever. But bullets connected somehow, some way to this case, absolutely, and I don't care if they were on the set or not, bullets connected to this case absolutely would be exculpatory evidence. Now, you've heard the Brady rule mentioned a lot. Let me just tell you what that is really quickly. The Brady doctrine is a pre-trial discovery rule that was established in the U.S. and by the Supreme Court in Brady versus Maryland in 1963. The rule requires that the prosecution must turn over all exculpatory evidence. That means all evidence that could be possible, could be helpful to the defense, even if it's just a little teeny tiny help. They need to be able to see it. They have to turn over all exculpatory evidence to the defendant in a criminal case. It is evidence that might exonerate their defendant. It was ruled that this evidence was exculpatory. It was ruled that they purposely did not turn it over, and therefore charges against Alec Baldwin are dismissed with prejudice, meaning they cannot be refiled ever again. It's a way to punish the prosecution for doing this. Now, you heard that many prosecutors quit this case. I don't know why in the hell this case was even brought in the first place. All right. Alec Baldwin was told the gun is cold. It's okay to shoot. Now, here's the thing with these bullets, from what I've learned. He looks in his gun. The bullets look real. All right. But you have to take them out and shake them. And I can't remember if the one that makes the noise is a dummy or if the one that's silent is a dummy. I think the one that makes the noise is a dummy. You shake it, and if it makes a noise, that's a dummy. Well, the actor's not going to do that. That's why they hire an armorer. Somebody with experience is supposed to do that. Why real bullets were ever allowed on that set is unbelievable to me. Now, some would argue Alec Baldwin was a producer, and he really had a tight budget, and he hired the cheapest armorer he could find, or a cheap one that didn't know what they were doing. Well, okay. But the judge ruled that they couldn't argue and reveal that Alec Baldwin was a producer. He's only an actor. They handed him a gun. They said it was cold, meaning there were dummy bullets in it. I don't see how in the world they thought they were going to be able to win this case at all if it went to a jury. I think you would have found not guilty so quick your head would spin. And then this, it is like Scott Reich said, it's a black eye on the prosecution. They should never have done this. And that's in my legal opinion. And I am a lawyer in my own mind, people. Take that for what it's worth. Okay.
Okay.
And also tomorrow night, Hidden True Crime with Lauren and Dr. Matthias. They're going to be talking a lot. They're going to be talking all about this case tomorrow night at, is it 7:30 Mountain Time? I'm not sure, but we'll put the link up. So you can definitely watch that. Okay, I am so excited to bring back one of our favorite people on this YouTube Live. And Megan, it's because you are always there to help us understand, and you're willing to jump on within a moment's notice because we don't know what the hell's going on, and you're there to help. At least I don't. And you're there to help us. Now, 2 nights ago, we played an 8-minute clip of Kevin. Oh God, see my mind. I swear to God, Kevin. Thank you. Talking to lawmakers, saying that, hey, we need stronger laws to protect kids. So what happened to me with Jodi Hildebrandt and what happened to our kids with Jodi doesn't happen again. I'm just going to play a real quick, I think it's Channel 2 News update on this, so people get an idea. Okay, this is KUTV2 News in Salt Lake City. And this is just a little 2.5-minute report just to give everybody an idea of what we're talking about. And then we'll come back to you, Megan, okay?
Okay.
Here we go.
Kevin Franke, the ex-husband of convicted child abuser Ruby Franke, says there are some big loopholes in the child care system, and he's calling on lawmakers to close some of those loopholes.
Today, lawmakers got a firsthand account from DCFS about what went wrong in the Franke Hildebrandt case and why it took so long for police to step in. Paul Nelson has more on the push to reform how cases of abuse are investigated.
This is a question that lawmakers say they've had for a long time. Why did it seem to take so long for police and DCFS to start investigating the allegations of abuse against Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt? But today, Kevin Franke told lawmakers it's because Jodi Hildebrandt knew how to play the system.
Kevin Franke went before the Child Welfare Legislative Oversight Panel and told panel members that Jodi Hildebrandt knew the child welfare system like the back of her hand, and she knew where all the cracks in the system are.
I've come to learn that Jodi masterfully coached Ruby in navigating the child welfare loopholes in this state.
One tactic, keep the kids isolated.
Because of the complete isolation of my children, there was not sufficient evidence based on our current laws for government to intervene despite the clear red flags recognized and reported by our close friends and neighbors.
Another tactic Hildebrandt reportedly told Franke, don't cooperate with investigators. In fact, ignore them completely.
Not answer the door,
not speak with authorities, DCFS or police, just remain silent.
Franke was finally able to speak with DCFS Director Tanya Myrup face-to-face for the first time since his wife was arrested. Myrup tells 2 News they don't have the authority to enter a home without a warrant, and the non-cooperative families can be hard to deal with.
We are then able to talk with our attorneys and see what we can do to continue to ensure that the children in that home are safe.
Myrup says they'll be looking at the system as a whole to see what needs to be fixed.
Any policy that you can think of now?
I think that over the next year, and as always, we'll continue to look at just all of the system, beginning to end.
Meanwhile, Franke also wants an audit of the Division of Professional Licensing to find out why Hildebrandt still had a license to give mental health advice.
To protect our children so that what happened to my family cannot happen to anyone else.
Now, members of the panel actually are planning another meeting in October with Doppel, and they're going to ask specifically questions about Hildebrandt's license and how she was able to keep it for so long.
Okay, and again, that's from KUTV News in Salt Lake City. Okay, Megan, when we were playing Kevin Ruby's full testimony, if you will, to lawmakers, like I said, about 8 minutes, you were texting us and explaining things. And it is so fascinating. Let's just take it step by step. What do you have to say about Kevin's testimony, about Kevin Franke's testimony, and why did it? Why did you go, hey, Trish and Stacy, hold on, we got to explain something. Well, what's going on?
Yeah, so one of the things that I think a lot of people don't understand is that within the culture of the LDS Church, there is a level of trust that gets assigned to anybody who is in a position of power within the church congregation or leadership or any of that. And I think that's something that people who are not members of the LDS Church really don't understand, because it's something that is unique to high demand religions. It's something that's unique to very closed groups. And the LDS Church, it's one of those things that it gets referred to sometimes as quote unquote the Mormon Mafia. Members of the LDS Church only want to do business with members of the LDS Church.
Right.
And so there's sort of a level of trust that is unspoken within the church. If you've got, for example, a plumber in your church congregation, you're going to call him before you would call the plumber that's 1 block away, because you know he's LDS, and the assumption is that everybody who is LDS is sort of trying to live the gospel in an honest way and trying to hold up the standards of the church. And so it's sort of this unspoken circle of trust that gets sort of perpetuated throughout the culture. And within the Mormon Church, if you're a leader in the Mormon Church, it gives you an even higher level of clout. And what happens is that people who are regular congregants within a community will go to their bishop or the leader of the congregation, equivalent to a pastor, for example, and they'll go to their bishop with marital problems, financial problems, problems of all sorts, just trying to, live within the confines of Mormonism and trying to live up to the standards of Mormonism. And the bishop will make recommendations about what you should do to change your life or what you can do to do better. And a lot of times the bishop has some discretionary funds that he can use to help members of the church get therapeutic help. And on the bishop's radar is a list of therapists who are quote unquote approved by the church to treat members of the LDS Church. And when you're approved as a therapist by the church, basically what it means is that you're a faithful believing member, and you're going to encourage your patients to continue to espouse the doctrines of Mormonism, sometimes at the expense of your mental health, but for the quote unquote greater good of saying that Mormonism is the highest and best that you can get to. If you don't fit in Mormonism, then we're going to help you find a way to fit. As a counselor, I'm going to guide you to live the principles of the gospel in a more emphatic way in order to help you overcome depression or anxiety or things like that. So they've got a list of therapists who are going to basically toe the company line, if we're going to put it in very blunt terms. So
Right.
for example, when I went to a Mormon therapist as a young unwed mother, my therapist's goal was to get me to either marry the young man who was the father of the child or to put my child up for adoption, because those were the only two options that were acceptable in Mormonism. It was nothing about trying to heal the things that were broken within me. It was more about trying to get me to be an acceptable member of the community. And so these approved list of therapists are not necessarily ethical practitioners. They are just people who are acceptable within Mormonism. So as an example, there was a very public excommunication of a Mormon therapist. Her name was Natasha Helfer, and she was basically trying to convince the Mormon Church that masturbation is a normative developmental practice among teenagers, especially teenage boys, and that we should not demonize it, and that we should not punish young men for this practice. We should not punish young women for this practice. We shouldn't punish anybody for this practice. It's just a normal human developmental practice. Well, because she was so outspoken about that, the Mormon Church ended up excommunicating her, because she had this horrible choice to make, where she could either be an ethical practitioner and go along with this science-based research that supports that theory, or she could deny the science-based research and she could toe the Mormon line. And so she lost a whole bunch of her clientele. The bishop stopped referring people to her. She had to go and rebuild her practice. And then she was eventually excommunicated just because she was trying to be an ethical therapist. And I bring that up just to say that Jodi was on the list. Jodi Hildebrandt was on the list of approved Mormon therapists. According to Jodi's niece, Jessie, the majority of Jodi's revenue came from bishops in the Mormon Church who were referring their congregants to Jodi for mental health therapy. And Jodi was one of the central figures who demonized masturbation and basically said that anybody who masturbated was a sex addict. And so when you start labeling people that way, who are just practicing like normal behavior, normal human behavior, then you come up with this really unhealthy system. So that's kind of why I started reaching out to you guys, because there's this component of Mormonism, the indoctrination of believing your bishop and a therapist who gets relayed, or you get referred to a therapist by your bishop. That's another layer of trust in the circle of trust. And so it's something I think that people outside Mormonism need to understand, because when you get referred to a therapist by your bishop because they're a faithful person, it's like they're really trying to help you be the best Mormon that you possibly can. And it adds a level of mental mind messing that
Right.
people just don't understand.
Exactly. And here's the problem, okay? Scientifically, we know that masturbation doesn't cause any problems. I mean, my God, it's especially with teenage boys, it's just natural. But with the LDS Church, and not just the LDS Church, but other religions too, it's, oh no, it's horrible. How do we as a society stop this misinformation from going out there? And it's terrible misinformation. It's wrong and it's harmful. Not just that, but other things. And then we're going to get to Jodi Hildebrandt here in just a minute, but that's kind of a general question to you, Megan. I'd like to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I just think that generally, if we are malleable and changeable and willing to admit that thoughts and feelings and emotions and ideologies that we have held in the past, if more factual research comes out that disproves what we've believed in the past, that we can accept that without shame and just say, well, I didn't know then, and now that I know better, I'm going to do better. And any society, any religion, any group in which normal sexual behavior is demonized, that sexual behavior is going to come out in dysfunctional ways.
Absolutely.
We see it in the Catholic Church. We see it in the Mormon Church. We see it in the Amish community. We see it anywhere that normal sexual behavior is demonized. And so when we start shaming people for normal, healthy sexual desires, it's going to come out in dysfunctional ways. And it's incumbent on those of us who are more awake and more realizing that this is normal, to normalize it to other people and to say, like, it is okay if you have these feelings. And I sort of compare it to what started happening within the LGBTQ community when people started coming out more openly. And there was a large movement in the religious right that was demonizing these people and saying, like, there's something wrong with you and we need to electroshock this out of you, or we need to immersion therapy this out of you, instead of saying, like, maybe this is just a normal human thing that happens. We started to demonize it, and that's where all the dysfunction came from, and so many people were harmed by that. And I think this is along those same lines as well.
Hang on, I'm just Obi Rusty, I'm still in Salt Lake. We're meeting tomorrow. Email me if you'd like to join us. We are meeting at 4 p.m. tomorrow in Sandy. So let me give you my email address. Hang on. We're having a little hookup here, Megan, just with some of our mad chatters, and your members in chat are more than welcome to come. Let's see, email me.
I wish I was going to be around for that. That sounds like fun.
It'll be so fun. It is going to be so much fun. Hold on.
I wish I was too.
I know. I'll come to where you guys are soon, and we'll have meetups. So anyway, my email is websleuthvideos@gmail.com. And I promise we're going to get to Jodi Hildebrandt, but I know when I was growing up, I consider myself an honorary Mormon, even though I was raised Catholic. All my friends were Mormon, my relatives were Mormon. And I remember the bishops taking my girlfriends in their little offices and talking to them about, you don't touch your body, and very personal, uncomfortable things that you'd have trouble talking to anybody at that age, let alone your bishop. Are they still allowed to do that in the LDS Church? I read that they weren't, but I don't know.
Thank goodness there was a man named Sam Harrison who advocated very, very heavily for youth to be interviewed only if there was a parent present.
Good.
And he advocated very, very vehemently for that, and he was excommunicated for it. And then a few months after he was excommunicated, guess what? The church came out with a policy change saying, okay, if you have a child who is between the ages of 12, you're right, Sam Young, I'm so sorry, I missaid, I said Sam Harrison, it's Sam Young. If you have a child who is going to be interviewed, then you can be in the room with that child. And it's one of those things that where we see very blatantly the hypocrisy of the LDS Church, where Sam Young advocated for that to be a policy change. They excommunicated him because he said, absolutely, you cannot challenge us that way. Then right after they excommunicated him, just a few months later, they made that policy change. And I remember when that happened, because of course I had kids at that time, and I never liked the idea of my kids going into the bishop and being asked very personal questions. At one point, they said to us parents, you need to stop asking your children, especially your young men, when or have you ever viewed pornography? What you need to start asking them is, when was the last time that you viewed pornography? Because they're like, we know everybody's doing it. We know everybody's seeing it. It's a huge problem. You just need to assume that your kids are doing it. And I was like, this feels so gross and wrong to me, because it's this view that was adopted by the generation before me, that everything that kids want is inherently bad and wrong. And we need to just assume that they're terrible people. And I remember being so grateful that I was finally allowed to be in the room with my kids when the bishop was asking them questions, because I could say, you don't have to answer that question. Or I could say, that's not appropriate for you to ask that question. And so, yeah, the whole thing was horrific and terrible. And there were many times when I got interviewed by a bishop where they asked inappropriate questions. Thank goodness it was not to the level that some people have experienced, but I still did. And up to the very time when I left the church, felt very violated with having to share such intimate details with somebody who, frankly, my bishop, at one point I had a bishop who was a landscaper. I had a bishop who was a software engineer.
How does they know? How do they know anything? Yeah.
They don't have any training, or very, very little training, on how to deal with truly traumatic circumstances. And they're just given a general handbook of how to do things. And in the church, we call this bishop's roulette, because sometimes you could go to your bishop and confess something. And we saw this in the Lori Vallow-Daybell case with my cousin, where she went into the bishop and she said, well, I'm either going to get a temple recommend or I'm going to murder my husband.
And so nothing happened. Yeah.
So the bishop gives her a temple recommend and says, go and repent and do better. And then some people go into their bishop, like me, as an unwed mother. I went in and said, yeah, I'm pregnant. And he said, okay, we're going to disfellowship you, and you can't take the sacrament, and you can't pray or speak or sing in any public meetings for 18 months or whatever. And like, what if I had gone in and said, I'm really sorry that I'm pregnant and I just want to turn my life around. Can I please have a temple recommend? You know, it just depends on what bishop you get and what their views are, and how strict they are, and how forgiving they are, and how willing they are to work with you. It's insane to me.
It is. And you mentioned earlier about now a parent can go in with the child and say that's inappropriate.
Yeah.
What I'm wondering is, if a mother is in there with a child and the bishop, who will always be a man, asks a question and the mother says that's inappropriate, how well is that going to go over with that bishop?
Again, it depends on the bishop roulette. I've had some bishops who are very understanding and very kind and very generous and very accepting and very loving and accommodating and wanting your kids to be successful. And then I've had other bishops who are extremely strict and extremely unfeeling and unwilling to listen to your individual experiences, and didn't really care what your individual experience was. They were only interested in the power that they had to either take away your temple recommend or not, you know? So it just really depends on who you get on the other side of that desk. And it's nothing you can control, which I feel like is really arbitrary and horrible coming from an organization that claims to speak for God.
Exactly. Okay, let's get to Jodi Hildebrandt and Kevin Franke. Somebody said in chat, there's Kevin acting like he had no role in any of this. What bothers me, Megan, and maybe I'm wrong, and this is what I want to ask you. Wasn't Kevin there when his wife was making those videos that, I'm sorry, were abusive, when she had millions of followers and they were making, she said, millions of dollars? And he was just fine with that. Then Jodi Hildebrandt comes in and did her thing, which was, it's the husband's fault. She gets the husband out of the way, gets close to the mom and the kids, and then starts her evilness. First question, wasn't Kevin complicit in the abuse in the beginning when his wife when she was making these videos?
I think this is a great question. I think it's one that we can't answer because of a number of things. Number one, there is the inherent mental illness that comes with being a member of a high demand religion, where you justify certain things if it means that you're going to be helping someone to get closer to God.
Yeah.
And so a lot of parents justified what I would consider to be abusive behavior if they believed that it was going to help mold their child to be more compliant to commandments or to be more acceptable within the system. And again, I'm loving that you're pinning this comment right now, because it's not unique to Mormonism,
I want
unfortunately.
to stress that. It is not. You're right.
Yeah, it's not unique to Mormonism. It can be in any high demand religion, and it can be in any religious system where the stakes are very high socially to be seen as acceptable, and where appearances are very important or more important than the mental health of your children and things like that. So it happens in all kinds of dysfunctional systems. So I just want to acknowledge that you're going to add a high demand religion to a very successful YouTube channel where they had millions of viewers. They were bringing in millions of dollars in revenue just from people watching their videos. They were living their lives online in a bubble where they were getting like 90% positive feedback from people. And that sort of perpetuates everything that you're doing. It gives you some validity. It makes you feel like what you're doing is right. It makes you feel like people agree with you, like you should continue down the same path. And changing the behavior means losing YouTube followers, which means losing your revenue, losing your livelihood. It also means the potential of having to go in front of your bishop and say, I screwed up, I did something wrong, which means potentially losing your temple recommend, losing your social status within the church. It was just a very high stakes thing. So I can't say that 100% Kevin Franke was in a good place mentally where he could look objectively at the behavior of his wife making those videos and say, I think this is wrong. I think this is hurtful to the kids. I think that he was in a box and in a bubble, and I just think that contributed a lot to the dysfunction of the whole system.
Exactly. And then we have the LDS Church, like you said, with their list of these approved therapists. And one of those approved therapists who got lots of clients from the LDS Church was Jodi Hildebrandt. Now, explain to us, kind of move us through what Jodi did in the Franke case. And it was not just to them, but this is how she operated. And again, the Mormon Church knew this, if I'm not mistaken, but please continue.
Yeah, and that's the other thing about quote unquote church vetted therapists is that the bishops don't dig into whether or not the therapist is practicing in an ethical manner. They don't know the standards of the licensing board. They don't know what is healthy and unhealthy from a therapist standpoint. All they know is that the therapist has agreed to treat people in a faith-based manner. In other words, encouraging them to continue their Mormon faith in a healthy way. And so just because somebody is approved on the approved list doesn't mean anybody has looked into their practices to say that they're healthy or safe or ethical. Mm-hmm. It just means that they toe the Mormon line. So let's say that first. And then let's go back to the question of, I'm sorry, what the original question I wanted?
It was, how did Jodi Hildebrandt operate when it came to the Franke family? And this is what she did pretty much with every family. And then Insightful One, I'm going to go to you for any comments you might have. So I'm sorry, Megan, go ahead.
Yeah, that's okay. So there, and I'm sorry for not remembering the wording of the original question.
No worries.
But Jodi Hildebrandt operated in a very specific way with all of her clients. So the Frankes were not unique in this situation. We have this documented not only from Adam Paul Steed, but from many other people who have reported that they were patients of Jodi Hildebrandt, and this is the way that she would operate. She would get a couple together. She would listen to the concerns of the couple. She would immediately start blaming the husband for the majority of the problems. Mm-hmm. She would separate the husband and wife from each other. She would put the husband in an addiction recovery group. And
was it for porn always?
Yes, and I'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
But she would isolate the wife away from the husband and convince the wife that her husband was abusive, and convince the wife that her husband was engaging in specific abusive behaviors. Meanwhile, the husband would go into this group therapy situation where the husband would be convinced that he was a sex addict. And basically, Jodi Hildebrandt's take was, if you have ever watched pornography or if you have ever masturbated, you're a sex addict, period, full stop. And so there would be people in these groups who maybe masturbated once a month.
Right.
They would also be in a group with men who were compulsively masturbating, watching porn every single day. It was interfering with their daily lives. It was not normative behavior, those kinds of things. And so it would be very confusing, because what we as a society understand as an addiction is something that interferes with your ability to have normal relationships and to function on a daily basis. In the DSM-5, there's nothing in there that says sex addiction is a thing, but addictive behaviors are a thing, right? And so there's a list of criteria that addictive behaviors have to meet before it can be treated as an addiction.
Mm-hmm.
Sex addiction is not even on the radar. It's something that I think personally Jodi Hildebrandt invented.
Yes.
And she did sort of, the Mormon Church borrowed from the 12-step program, and Jodi Hildebrandt was instrumental in implementing this addiction recovery program that started getting touted around 2010 as something that every single member needed to attend and go through, because all of us are addicts on some level, whether we're addicted to Diet Coke or whether we're addicted to sweets or whether we're addicted to porn. It's all the same, is what the church taught us. And which is incredibly harmful, because then it sort of puts you, like, this normal person who drinks 2 Diet Cokes a day gets lumped into the same category as a pedophile.
Right.
And it's so confusing and harmful to so many people. So Jodi Hildebrandt's MO was to separate the husband and wife, to put the husband in an addiction recovery group and convince him that he was a sex addict, and then separate the wife, isolate her away, and convince her that her husband was abusive. And by degrees, sort of convince the wife that she needed to leave the husband, that they needed to be completely separate, and that the husband needed to go through this intensive program of recovery, and that the wife then was left to sort of deal with the fallout of the separation and the children and the negative things that were happening because of the abuse. So for those people who say, where was Kevin Franke? Why was he absent for a year? How could he have let this happen to his children? Well, he got convinced that he was a sex addict, and that it was in the best interest of his children to be away from them until he could overcome his addiction to pornography, whether it was every day or whether it was once a year.
Exactly. And Saiful One, do you have any questions or comments before we go?
I find this also strange, because my mother was very religious, and she's a Jehovah's Witness. And so I was brought up as a Jehovah's Witness, but we never were told any of this sort of thing in regards to the masturbation or anything. I mean, it never came up.
Mm-hmm.
I just find it so strange. But I do have a question for Megan. So if you're a Mormon and you're in, is it called a congregation in Mormonism?
Or, well, it's called a ward, but it's the same thing as a congregation. Yeah.
Okay. Say you have an issue with one of the therapists or something going on. Who is the top person you could go to discuss it?
Well, for me personally, I felt like, so the bishop is the leader of the congregation.
Okay.
And then there's a stake president who is the leader of many congregations, and the bishops all report to the stake president. So for me, in my situation, I felt like if I had a problem with my bishop, I would go to the stake president and say, can you help me out here? And I did that on a number of occasions. And I had some stake presidents who were very receptive to what I was saying, but the changes never happened on the local level. So, you know, when I had a bishop who was really horrible to me during my divorce, I went to my stake president. I said, please, can you help me? My kids are struggling. I'm struggling. And he said, I feel for you. And I promise you that we're going to find some people to help you, and we're going to get some good things happening for you. And nothing changed. So trying to get something to change on a level like that is just impossible, because these poor men are, they're very minimally trained. They have careers and families of their own, and they're dedicating a huge amount of time to their church service. How can they possibly help everybody? It's just an impossible task.
Exactly.
Is it the same if they want to report some sort of misconduct, would you go to the same person?
Yeah, and that's another layer, because there
Yeah.
again, you have bishop roulette, you have stake president roulette. So if I go to my bishop and I say, I went to a therapist and it seemed like what she was teaching was really harmful, I really think this is wrong, I want to report it, the bishop would say, okay, well, let me take that under advisement. And likely what he would do would be to talk with the other people in the ward who've been to that counselor, the other people in the stake who'd been to that counselor, like, are your experiences the same? Is this a one-off kind of thing? Do we need to take them off the list? Or is it just this person having a hard time? And it's like 643rd on the list of things they have to talk about every Sunday. So it's not going to be a huge priority. Now, again, if we're going to something more severe, like somebody coming and saying they've been abused in some way by a church leader or something like that, well, then you get into a situation of, is the person that you're talking to going to try to cover it up, or are they actually going to report it? And unfortunately, the practice and the official policy in the Handbook of the Mormon Church is that if abuse gets reported to a bishop or a stake president, they are to call the hotline, which is not a mental health service line. It is a bunch of lawyers. The church firm, the firm that is the official lawyer firm of the church, the Curtin McConkie law firm, that have been instructed to tell the bishop or the stake president to do whatever is in the best legal interest of the church, not what is in the best mental health interest of the victim.
That is horrific.
Yeah.
Now, again, is this what Kevin Franke is looking to change? Is that what he was saying?
I think in his statement that is some of what he's trying to get to change, but I think it sounds like one of his biggest beefs is that Jodi Hildebrandt's therapy license had been suspended by the state of Utah, but she still continued to practice as a life coach, which basically means that it's an unlicensed field, it's unregulated, and that she could go and say whatever she wanted, implement whatever practices she wanted, unobstructed by a licensing board. And I think that's a lot of what he's trying to get changed, is the life coaching industry, which to me feels like, yes, that is a problem, but it's a tiny contributing factor to what actually happened to his family. I think that the majority of the issues that happened with his family came about because the LDS Church was recommending Jodi Hildebrandt as a competent therapist, and she was not.
Exactly. When did Jodi come off of that list from the LDS Church?
So there was a complaint against her by Adam Paul Steed. He was the one, he and his father were the ones who filed an official complaint against her with the state licensing board. Her license was suspended, and I believe at that time is when she was removed from the list of official therapists of the LDS Church. But I'm sure there were plenty of people who still regarded her as a safe person because of her influence in the community. And sort of once you're in the Mormon community, if you make a mistake, it's sort of this thing about, well, maybe we should just forgive her. She made a mistake. Let's still trust her. And she still was instrumental in implementing the addiction recovery program. She still had this connections group where she basically turned therapy into an MLM. And she started training other therapists, and these therapists were paying her for this training. And then all the clients that they got, they were paying her a portion of what these clients were paying. So it turned into this horribly dysfunctional system. And I agree that maybe the coaching system, you know, in Utah needs some kind of regulation on that level. But like, I'm a coach, I coach people, but I always have these disclaimers where I say, if you're experiencing trauma, you need to be working with a therapist in addition to what you're doing with me, because there are some things that you need a licensed mental health professional to go through. Like, I can help you tidy your home. I can help you figure out your finances. I can help you hire a therapist. I can help you navigate difficult family relationships, but I can't heal you from trauma. And so there needs to be a distinction there. And I agree, maybe there does need to be some regulation there. But I feel like what Kevin Franke is attacking is the very, like, a small part of the problem when there's this huge other glaring problem elephant in the room that's not being addressed yet.
Exactly. And the problem with the legislature in Utah is they are mostly LDS. How are you going to get them to look at themselves and say, what you've been doing all these years is completely wrong, and we need to get licensed professional therapists in there that don't agree with your normal teachings, okay? Because if you have let's say a gay person, I dated 2 gay guys whose Mormon bishops told them, find a good woman and she will cure you of being gay.
Yep.
And I guess I should be flattered that I was chosen, you know, but I didn't get, I couldn't get the gay out of them. I didn't know I was chosen at the time. You know, I just couldn't figure out why they dumped me. And it was because they were gay. They tried. I don't, they're still not accepting of homosexuality. So what if you have a teenager that goes in there and is practically suicidal and is talking to their bishop? There should be some law that says you can't tell this person that they're going to go to hell because they're gay, but then you're regulating religion. So Megan, fix it all right now for us, please.
Yeah.
Oh, God. I guess I could. I wish that I could, but you know, historically, if we tear down religion, we as human beings are going to put something else up in its place, and we're actually seeing it happen in the United States right now under our noses, where young people and young adults are leaving religion in droves and they're turning to politics, and now politics is their religion. We as human beings want to feel safe. And what makes us feel safe is when somebody stands up and gives us all the answers to our problems and tells us how we should live our lives. And that's why we turn to religion, because it answers all these existential questions that are really hard to wrestle with. And I think if we as human beings could get better at staring into the abyss and sitting with the uncomfortable truth that we may not know it all, then the better off, the healthier that we're going to be. But it's just always going to be a human need and desire to have some explanation given to us that makes sense to us, that makes us feel safer. What I want to do is promote the idea that it's possible to have healthier religions. It's possible to have healthier family systems. They may not be perfect, but we can ask the hard questions to say, is this really what's healthy for me or not? And I think the hard part about Utah being a theocracy, basically because so many of the legislators are members of the LDS Church, and I think this is the problem I see with Kevin Franke's statement too. He leaves the church out of it because he still believes so much in it, and it would be devastating for him to confront the fact that maybe his religion is also flawed because he's had so much that was broken in his life. And I personally can attest to this, because as I was going through my healing journey, I clung to my faith as I was trying to unpack the unhealth of my family system and the trauma of my childhood and the difficulty of my marriage and the overwhelming task of being a mother to 6 kids with a spouse who wasn't engaged. The thing that I clung to was my faith. The thing that kept me going was this belief that there was a God who loved me and cared about me despite all of the crap that I was going through. And so I completely understand Kevin's reluctance to face that at the same time that he's facing all these other horrific things. But the bottom line is that a lot of this came out of the unhealthy Mormon system. And at some point, we all have to take a look at our beliefs, our dogma, and our religious systems, our family systems, and everything in our lives, and examine it objectively and say, is this healthy? Is this the best thing for me? Or is it not? Can I step away and admit that maybe something that I have relied on and clung to is not the best thing for me?
Exactly. And I want to read what Julie Giles says. LOL, the Utah legislature is many things, but self-reflective is not one of them. And boy, is that, growing up in Utah, I can attest to that for sure. And I want to stress, we're not saying these people in the LDS Church, they're not inherently evil. They just haven't been educated, and they can't seem to accept that things like it's okay to be gay. You're not going to go to hell or whatever. You're not going to go to, the low heaven if you're gay. I mean, and to have therapists being recommended to families with suicidal, gay children is just appalling. And how do we get the legislature, 95% LDS, to change? I don't know, Megan. I'm just so, I'm just terrified that how do we get them to change? How do we legislate this type of change?
I think legislating it is not necessarily the type of change that's really going to cause the institutional change, the change on an institutional level that needs to happen. What I always love is when individual people get in front of the legislature and tell their personal stories, because it's really easy for people to sit back in their echo chamber and say being gay is wrong. But when you have a son or a daughter or a grandson or a family friend or somebody that who comes out as gay, it completely changes your perspective, because now it becomes personal. Now you know someone, now you love someone who has been through this experience, and you listen to their struggles and you listen to their stories and you listen to their experience, and then you legislate based on that. I think that more than anything else, the more people who can talk about their personal experiences and can talk about their personal pain and the things that they have been through as a result of harmful practices and harmful legislation, that is what changes minds. Because at the core of it, we are human beings. And when we see another human being in suffering, that is what changes minds. That is what changes legislation. That is what changes dogma. So if more people would come out and talk about their personal experiences, if the legislature would allow people to talk about their personal experiences more, I think hearts would be changed and people would be moved to do the thing that is the most human, which is to be more kind and more loving and more accepting, because all of us are just struggling and having a hard time, and all of us want the same things. We all want peace, we all want happiness, we all want safety for ourselves and our loved ones. And I think that legislature would come around to that the more that they're exposed to the general public and to just individual people having human experiences.
Exactly. And I have to say, in 2019, I think it was 2019 or 2018, the governor signed a bill. It was the hate law. And it was a big step in Utah. It made it so, if you committed a crime against a person because of their, of who they were sexually or their religion or whatever, it was an enhanced charge. And that was brought upon because of a gay killing of a friend of mine named Doug Kohler. And the law wasn't there to save him. But I was proud of Utah to step up and do that. And so I know it can happen. And again, we're just talking about gay people here, but it's everything. It's you've just got to have intelligent people not looking at their religion to answer the questions of the world today. In your own religious circle, sure, but don't be the professional and push your religious beliefs on somebody who is suffering greatly. And Megan, your YouTube channel at _verse, that's what you deal with. You deal with healing and healing the trauma. Tell us about that.
Well, I just, as I started my podcast, I didn't want to dwell on the past. I didn't want to be constantly identified as a victim or constantly identified as Lori's cousin or constantly identified as a survivor of abuse. What I wanted to do was tell a new story, and I wanted to tell the story of my healing and encourage other people to engage in that process as well. And so that's what I try to do on my channel, is to help encourage people to engage in the difficult work of healing, because it is difficult. And I'm trying to create a community there where people can come together and share their struggles and share their intentions for healing and share all of the things that we're going through together, because ultimately, it's, as I've said before, we're all the same. We all want the same things. And I think that healing can look very similar for all of us if we're willing to engage in those discussions. And so that's really what I've tried to talk about on my channel is healing, is moving forward from difficult situations, and just being self-empowered to know that I have everything that I need inside of me to heal. I instinctively know what I need to heal, and I think all of us do. It's just simply getting to the place where we can start ignoring the voices that are coming into us from the outside and start listening more to that inner voice that instinctively knows what we need, and allowing ourselves the space and the grace, to forgive ourselves for what we do when we're in survival mode, and to just move forward with the intention of being a better version of ourselves today than we were yesterday. And that's all.
And Beth B, amen, if I may say that. Separation of church and state. Yes. What a thought, huh? What a thought. So exactly, Beth B. Real quick, you mentioned that you're Lori Cox Vallow, Ryan Daybell, Smith and Jones' cousin. And you saw the family growing up there, and let's face it, very troubled family. I mean, they raised 2 serial killers. But going beyond that, there is a book that Lori and Chad just devoured, and so have a lot of other LDS members, and that's Visions of Glory. And when you read that book, Chad took a lot of his beliefs that he put out there from Visions of Glory. Do you know, is it true that Chad Daybell was meeting with, is it Tom Harrison? Is that the author?
Yeah, so Tom Harrison, he sort of tried to disguise his identity in the book. He called himself Spencer in the book.
Right.
He told that story to an author named John Pontius. So John Pontius was the as told to sort of in Visions of Glory, but Tom Harrison was on the down low telling people that he was Spencer. He was holding meetings where he was talking to people about his experiences in the book. And so it was sort of the worst kept secret in Mormonism that Tom Harrison was actually Spencer from Visions of Glory. And he continues to have a lot of influence in the Mormon community. In fact, he was an aftercare specialist for Operation Underground Railroad. He was one of the founders of Eternal Core, which was a group of therapists who were trying to bring religion into therapy. Jodi Hildebrandt was a part of that as well. He had a big influence on Maurice Harker, who was another therapist who was arrested, tried, and convicted for physically abusing one of his patients, saying that they had a demon or a dark spirit, and he would physically abuse that patient based on things that Tom Harrison told him. We know for certain, and this comes from Lauren of Hidden True Crime podcast, she has it from at least 3 very credible sources that Tom Harrison was meeting with Chad Daybell and Julie Rowe. And a lot of the influence for their ideas did come from Tom Harrison, who was Spencer in Visions of Glory.
And in Visions of Glory, did they talk about portals? And tell us about that. Tell us some of the beliefs that Chad stole and made his own from Visions of Glory, because to me it's pretty terrifying.
Yeah, it's a horrible book. And for those who are curious, please don't go out and buy it. Mm-hmm. It's available for free online on the internet. There are even people who read it with humor on their YouTube channels. So please go find another resource other than supporting it, because it continues to sell thousands of copies, and it's horrifying. The premise of the book is essentially that Spencer has some near-death experiences, and he claims that these near-death experiences give him special powers to be able to commune with the other side. And in one of these near-death experiences, he claims that an angel sort of takes him around and shows him all these different things. And one of the things that this angel shows him is that when people engage in sinful behavior, for example, watching pornography or going to a bar and drinking or engaging in affairs, that something happens. There's a rip in their soul, and a dark spirit is allowed to enter their bodies. And this is where Chad Daybell's theology came from, that he believed that there were dark spirits inhabiting children. And I don't know how you get to that leap, but it is 100% from Visions of Glory. And at the end of Visions of Glory, there are a couple of other near-death experiences that are recounted from people who were leaders in the Mormon church, supposedly to give more clout to the things that Spencer was saying in this book. The thing to me that is the smoking gun is that in one of these visions, in his last very long vision, Spencer talks about what it's going to be like in the end times when there are calamities that happen around the return of Jesus Christ to the world. And one of the things he talks about is going into portals to gather the 144,000 or the faithful people to get them ready for the second coming of Jesus Christ. And one of the things he talks about is that sometimes they had to pretend to be husband and wife in order to fool the dark forces that were out there in the world. Well, that's the couples ruse from the Tim Ballard Operation Underground Railroad.
Right.
All of the allegations against him from these women who were seduced into this couples ruse situation. And then the very worst, I think, smoking gun is that these people who were the 144,000, or who were the people who were gathered from the portals, were sort of wandering around the earth trying to gather more people. There were others who were against these people. And what Spencer says in the book is that we, as the 144,000, would come against these opposing forces, and we could tell whether they were righteous or not. We could tell whether they could be convinced to be righteous. And if we made the determination that they were beyond saving, we were free to deliver them from this mortal world. And it was a blessing to them, because then they would have less red on their ledger when they came to face Judgment Day. And so this is literally in Visions of Glory. To me, that is the smoking gun that says, if you've had a near-death experience, then you have a special connection with the beyond where you can determine if someone is righteous or not. And if you decide they're not righteous, it's okay for you to deliver them from their mortal life. And that's doing them a favor, because then they will have less sin to answer for in the next life.
Oh my God. That's actually in Visions of Glory.
Actually in the book.
I don't know why the LDS Church hasn't come out and said, do not read this. This is crazy talk, people.
Well, I will tell you why.
Okay, tell me why.
I have a theory.
I might hear it.
I believe that the LDS Church is straddling this ever-widening gap between extreme preppers on one side, who believe that the Mormon Church leaders have been led astray and that they're fallen prophets, and that we need to return to fundamentalism on one side. And then on the other side, we have people like Sam Young, who are advocating for parents to be involved in bishops' interviews, and like Natasha Helfer, who are advocating for proper teaching of sexual health, and other people who are advocating for LGBTQ acceptance and all of these other things. And you've got these two sides, and it's this division that keeps getting wider and wider and wider. And the LDS Church is straddling both sides of it. And if they make a move in one way or the other, they're going to lose half of their membership. They're going to lose half of their tithing dollars. They're going to lose half of their revenue. And in an already shrinking system where they make reports that they have over 17 million members when the reality is closer to 6, they're already losing. And I think they see it. And I think they are grasping at straws to try and hold on to as much as they can. And so they sit in their literal ivory tower in Salt Lake City, completely removed from the experiences of their members. And they say, well, my family's taken care of. I'm getting a big stipend. I've received the second anointing, so nothing that I do is going to count against me in the next life afterwards. So I'm just going to let the next generation take care of it. And I'm just going to sit up here and continue to stay in power, because as long as I'm in power, then I'm good. And they just don't care. I think that they just don't care, because if they say something in one direction or another, it creates controversy. And both sides are both harmed and benefited by their silence. And so they continue to stay silent because it benefits them.
That is absolutely frightening. Megan Connor, your YouTube channel is called @third_verse. You also have a podcast of the same name, correct?
My podcast is called The Midlife Revolution.
So not the same name, so I'm completely wrong. Midlife Revolution. We'll put that in the description as well.
Thank you.
But Megan, I might be putting you on the spot here. Well, before that, insightful one, do you have any more comments or questions before I put poor Megan on the spot?
I just want to tell her I really appreciate what you said earlier about basically finding, when it comes to religion or beliefs, finding what's right for you. Like I mentioned earlier that, my mom's a Jehovah's Witness and I was raised that way. And I believed it. And then in my early 20s, I started to question things. And I took theology classes in college. And it changed my life. I no longer believe that way anymore. It's totally different, and it did. And so I would just, like she's saying, if people have doubts or things are bothering them inside, it doesn't feel right to you, question it, research it, do what you need to do to find what's right for you. I really appreciate you saying that.
And it is absolutely true. And the thing is, because of the internet, I think it obviously changed the world. When I was growing up, you weren't supposed to question Mormonism at all. And there was really nowhere to go to look it up. Not anymore. So I can understand why officials in the LDS Church or in any big organized religion that is bringing in money, why they're very, very nervous. Okay, Megan Connor, my question to you is, and you've actually done this already through the show, but I just want to wrap it up this way. Can you give us some advice for people that may be struggling to try to get through this life, try to understand, try not to offend their families, try to, get with their parents again after a big, horrible family trauma? What can you tell these people? Because so many, I think most of us could use this advice.
I wish I just had, a panacea that could just help everybody heal.
I know.
But, healing is such an individual thing, because our woundings are individual woundings. Our experiences are so unique to us. And, two people can experience the same thing and come out completely differently.
Oh, yeah.
One harmed and one completely unscathed.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it's such a broad discussion to have, but I guess for me personally, I can only speak for my own experiences. And I'm certainly no expert of any kind. I've always said this, I'm just an expert in my own trauma, healing from my own experiences, but I just have so much compassion for my fellow human beings, because we all go through these things and we all are in need of healing. And so I guess the one thing that I can say that is universal to what I've experienced and heard other people experience too, is that you have to be true to yourself. You have to get to a place where you can get really quiet with yourself and listen to what you personally need and want. I think I was probably in my 40s before I even knew who I was and what I wanted for myself, because I spent so much of my life trying to fit into boxes that other people provided for me. And that is the entire point of the midlife revolution, is that I think some people think of midlife as a certain age, but for me, I just think it's a time when we stop. We just hit the red stop button on the treadmill that we got put on as children. And we look around and we say, is this what I want for my life? Is this the healthiest thing for me? am I living up to the highest version of myself? And we stop trying to please other people, and we finally start to honor who we are as our truest version of ourselves. And I think although healing looks different for everyone, I think that we can never have healthy relationships and connections with other people until we heal our relationship with ourselves first. We have to accept all of the parts of ourselves, both the parts that we think are great and wonderful and the parts that we think are problematic. We have to allow all of those parts of ourselves to have a seat at our table, to have a voice, and to speak their experience. And I just think that the more that we do that, and the more that we accept all of the parts of ourselves, the healthier that we're going to be, and the better that we're going to be able to relate to other people and have healthy and good relationships with other people.
Basically, it's like what the pilots tell us. You have to put your own oxygen mask on first before you can take care of anybody else. You got to take care of yourself first before you can help others. Megan Connor, I can't thank you enough. Every time you come on, it is such a great experience. We learn so much. You are welcome back anytime. And I love the fact that you jumped in and started texting us as soon as we started playing Kevin Frankie's little statement there. That was great. So keep doing that, okay?
I will. And thank you for having me on. Thank you to your community. Your people here are so wonderful. And I think you guys, what your mission is with Authrum, I think is so wonderful. I'm so grateful that you guys are out here having these discussions literally every single night. I think this is wonderful. I'm so grateful for this space.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
I call you Megan. I mean Megan. You know what I mean.
Okay.
So I just see it spelled that way, and I'm old. What can I tell you? Megan Connor, thank you so much. We'll talk again very soon. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I love her. Oh my gosh. She is the best. Absolute best. Now I want to mention what she mentioned about Authrum. If you notice, we don't take donations here. What we do ask you to do, if at all possible, is please subscribe to this site. It's amazing. It's called DNAsolves.com. It is part of Authrum. And if you could subscribe to this and make a monthly donation, then what happens is that money goes into where the lab and the people working so hard to identify the remains, that some of these remains have been waiting to be identified for over 50 years. Well, DNA Solves can do that. They can bring home the family members that have been missing for so long, but they can't do it without your help. So again, I've put this link up in chat. It's at the top, but let me put it in the chat right now. Where did it go? I just had, here it is. If you can subscribe, maybe just for $5 a month if you can. And if you can't, we understand completely. If you could just put this on your social media, we would be forever grateful. DNAsolves.com, a great organization. Okay, listen, my darling true crime angels. I'm going to be traveling next Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. I will try and do a live stream while I'm on the road. I'm heading back to Dallas. So if not, I'll be putting up some of our older YouTube videos that we've done, and I'll be putting things in our community posting. So but we'll try and get some live streams here while I'm on the road. So just stick around and look for those community postings. We'll tell you what's going on. Remember, we are meeting up tomorrow in Salt Lake City at 4 p.m. Let me put in my email again, websleuthsvideos@gmail.com. All right. If you'd like to join us, email me and I'll tell you where we're going to meet. And we would love to meet you. This will be fun. And whenever I go out of town, whatever city I'm in, I'm going to try and do these meet and greets, if you will. And I can guarantee you they will always revolve around food, because that's what I love so much. Insightful One, do you have any final comments for the night?
No, I don't actually. My brain is all just spinning at everything we talked about.
I understand. Hey, Lou Holt, email me and I'll tell you where we are meeting. Okay, let me put this up again. videos@gmail.com. Okay? So give me an email shout out here and I'll send you the information. All right. Hey, I want to thank our wonderful moderators and all the people from Megan's chat. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And our moderators here, that would be Moonlight View, Four Sons Mom, Yuta, and Leisha Gallegos. Thank you all so much. An insightful one. We couldn't do this without you. So we'll see everybody soon. Not sure when. Definitely by next Thursday. Hopefully before then. And don't forget, coming up on July 22nd, it's the end of the world again. Our 24-hour broadcast is going to have a lot of fun. Okay, everybody. We'll talk soon. You guys be safe out there. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.